Manipulation, betrayal, and murders. Today, we'll unveil the stories of the most notorious women in the Bible, the crimes they committed, and the history behind them. If this topic intrigues you, please consider supporting us by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to help spread the word. In third place, as the most wicked woman in the Bible, we have Herodias. Before delving into her wrongdoing, it's crucial to understand what transpired with John the Baptist. John the Baptist, a bold and charismatic prophet, began preaching in the regions around the Jordan River, denouncing sins and encouraging people to repent. He garnered a significant following due to his impactful message and devoted life in the desert. Tensions rose when John the Baptist publicly criticized the marriage of Herod Antipas to Herodias. Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee and Perea, had divorced his legitimate wife to marry Herodias. The issue was that she had recently divorced her husband Philip, who happened to be Herod Antipas's brother. The marriage of Herod Antipas to his brother's divorced wife was not just a moral concern, but also a defiance of Jewish laws. John the Baptist courageously denounced this illicit union, not hesitating to point out the moral consequences of such actions. His fiery speech didn't go unnoticed by Herodias, who, offended and threatened by John's message, desired to have him killed. However, Herod Antipas admired John the Baptist. Initially, he respected John as a prophet, even though at times he found his words intriguing. Yet, succumbing to political and social pressures, as well as the influence of Herodias, Herod Antipas eventually ordered John the Baptist's arrest. John the Baptist, while in prison, became a symbol of resistance, remaining faithful to his principles despite adversity. His imprisonment not only symbolized the conflict between divine morality and human ambitions, but also became a turning point in history. Herodias wasn't satisfied. For her, imprisonment alone wasn't enough. She truly desired to execute John. The climax of Herodias' story unfolds during an extravagant feast hosted by Herod Antipas. Herodias strategically instructs her daughter, often identified as Salome, to dance and captivate Herod, charming him to the point where he promises to grant her any request. The great opportunity arises. Salome, guided by her mother, chooses John the Baptist's head on a platter as her reward. Herod, a man of his word, bound by his oath and fearing the reaction of the guests, yields to the request. Thus, John the Baptist, the bold prophet who criticized the marriage of Herodias and Herod, is ultimately executed. In second place, among the most notorious women in the Bible, we find Athaliah. Athaliah's story unfolds in the corridors of power in Judah. She was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, thus having a lineage deeply rooted in the political and spiritual instability that characterized that era. Her son Ahaziah courageously ruled the northern kingdom. However, about a year later, both Ahaziah, the ruler of Judah, and Jehoram, the leader of Israel, met their tragic fates at the hands of Jehu, who killed them. After her son's death, none of his descendants were old enough to assume the throne of Judah. Therefore, Athaliah saw the opportunity to further consolidate her position. She undertook a bold maneuver, seizing control of the throne, challenging established expectations and traditions. Athaliah's ambition knew no bounds. Upon assuming power, she saw the royal lineage of David as a threat to her newly acquired position. The Davidic lineage held special significance in Jewish tradition, representing the divine promise of a Messiah descended from David. To achieve her goal, Athaliah took drastic and cruel action, ordering the execution of all descendants of the house of David who could pose a future threat to her reign. This attempt to exterminate the royal lineage involved a series of violent murders, aiming to eliminate any potential competition for her throne. However, her brutal strategy was thwarted by Jehoiada, the high priest, who hid Joash, the sole surviving descendant of David, in the temple. This bold action ensured the continuity of the Davidic lineage despite Athaliah's efforts. Later, when Joash reached the appropriate age, Jehoiada orchestrated a plan to crown him as king. Jehoiada conducted a public ceremony in favor of Joash, revealing the Davidic descendant. The populace became fervent upon realizing the imminent revolt. Athaliah, sensing the uprising, tore her clothes and cried, "Treason! Treason!" However, the people, following Jehoiada and supporting the legitimate restoration of the Davidic lineage, were not deceived by Athaliah's claims. Joash's ascent to the throne was a pivotal moment, and Athaliah was captured outside the temple. She was taken to the royal palace and executed there. The biblical account in the second book of Kings, chapter 11, verse 16, records the death of Athaliah, thus concluding her reign marked by intrigue and violence. Now, in the first place, the most ruthless woman in the Bible, Jezebel, also known as Jezebel. Jezebel, a Phoenician princess, married Ahab, the king of Israel, sealing a political alliance. Her impact transcended the boundaries of marriage as she brought with her the worship of Baal, a pagan god, introducing idolatry to Israel. Her marriage to Ahab became a union marked by a powerful yet negative influence that cast shadows over the nation. Jezebel was a staunch advocate of Baal worship, encouraging the construction of altars and temples dedicated to this pagan deity. Idolatry flourished under her influence, distancing the people of Israel from their traditional faith. Jezebel personified corruption and manipulation. Her influence introduced not only the worship of foreign gods, but also brutality against those who opposed her. She ordered the execution of various prophets of Jehovah, eliminating those who opposed her religious beliefs, including an intense persecution of the prophet Elijah, whose life was threatened by the queen's fury. Additionally, she abused royal power to fund and support hundreds of prophets of Baal, using state resources to promote this foreign religion. A striking passage in the Bible, illustrating Jezebel's wickedness, tells the story of Naboth, a righteous man and owner of a vineyard next to the royal palace. He refused to sell his property to Ahab, even when the king offered fair compensation. Ahab's desire for Naboth's vineyard became an obsession, but the righteous man's refusal remained unwavering. Here enters Jezebel's wickedness. Seeing Ahab's distress over not acquiring the vineyard, she devised a malevolent plan to satisfy the king's desires. Jezebel conspired to falsely incriminate Naboth, orchestrating false charges against him. False witnesses were summoned to accuse Naboth of blasphemy against God and the king. Jezebel's malevolent plan reached its climax when Naboth was condemned and stoned to death based on fabricated charges. The cruelty of this scheme reveals not only Jezebel's wickedness, but also the moral corruption that permeated Ahab and Jezebel's reign in Israel. Divine justice did not delay in manifesting itself. The prophet Elijah confronted Ahab and Jezebel, announcing divine judgment for Naboth's death and declaring that Jezebel's wickedness would not go unnoticed by God. Elijah proclaimed that dogs would lick her blood in the city of Jezreel. Later, Jezebel's end was as dramatic as her life. The Bible narrates that, after Ahab's death, his son Jehu assumed the throne. Driven by a divine mission, Jehu confronted Jezebel. The queen tried to seduce him with her cunning, but divine justice prevailed. Jezebel was thrown from a window by a king's officer, and her body was devoured by dogs, as prophesied by Elijah. Hope you enjoyed today's story. Please leave a comment letting us know which city you're watching this video from, and remember to subscribe to the channel to help spread our work. Hugs, and stay with God.